Friends, today we are in Ankara, the capital of the Republic of Turkey. We are now on Kemal Ataturk Boulevard. And from here we will now have a tour of this amazing city. A large or small excursion will turn out, time will tell. We will see different streets, see the old city center, and be sure to visit the memorable places of the events of 1920. And much more is to come. Be sure to follow our walk in detail. Click on the timecodes below this video. And don't forget to leave your big comments below this video. Don't forget to share this video with your friends. And we begin our tour of Ankara. Ankara is a rather peculiar capital of Turkey and the second largest city in the country after Istanbul. This is the heart of the Republic of Turkey, a bright and contrasting city where East and West organically merge. This dynamic modern metropolis is located in the hills of central Anatolia, roughly in the center of the country. The average height of the city above the sea is about 1,100 meters, which makes the weather here colder than on the coasts, in Antalya, Izmir or Istanbul. Twice as large as the Russian capital Moscow with all its suburbs. But this is not the case with architecture. Ankara is still full of nondescript places and places devoid of any noticeable appearance. But there are also interesting places here. Let us walk through them. With all this, Ankara is a rather calm city, and the rhythm of life in it is noticeably different from the rhythm of life in the country's largest and most popular city, Istanbul. Ankara symbolizes the real Turkey, the place where a new era began for the Turkish people. Literally 100 years ago, it was just a small town, spread out in the vicinity of the fortress of the same name. Its fate changed after the First World War, when Mustafa Kemal Ataturk and his supporters launched a struggle for independence in this city. In 1923, Ankara became the capital of the Republic of Turkey. Ataturk chose this city as his capital, seeking to get away from the Byzantine and Ottoman associations caused by Istanbul. However, the history of Ankara goes back to ancient times. The city was founded in the 2nd millennium BC and is rightfully considered one of the oldest in Asia Minor. He remembers the Hittites, Phrygians, Lydians, Persians, Greeks, Galatians, Romans, Byzantines and Ottomans. Despite the fact that Ankara is not as popular among tourists as Istanbul or the resort cities of Turkey, it is interesting as a sightseeing destination, moreover, non-tourist and more authentic, and most importantly, year-round. For example, many historical sites have been preserved in Ankara. There are ancient Roman archaeological sites, buildings of the Byzantine era, beautiful Ottoman mansions. As for modernity, Ankara is in no way inferior to the largest European capitals. It has a variety of museums and galleries, modern architecture, luxurious hotels, restaurants and cafes, discos, nightclubs, as well as ample opportunities for excellent shopping. Two of the most important buildings will tell tourists the history of Ankara, help to trace the connection between the past and the present. The Museum of Anatolian Civilizations and the Mausoleum of Ataturk, about which we have already made a separate issue on the channel. Today's Ankara is a huge administrative and educational center, full of civil servants, office workers, diplomats and students from all over the world. There are government and state buildings, consulates, military bases and major universities. Recently, Ankara has ceased to be a destination only for business tourism and today attracts more and more inquisitive travelers. Many tourists use Ankara airport as a transit hub on their way to various parts of the world. However, the city is worthy of a separate independent visit. It is the real quintessence of the whole of Turkey, its history, culture and traditions. But here we come to the Ulus Quarter. This is a quarter in Ankara located in the center of the capital. It houses such objects as the Museum of the War of Independence, the Museum of the Republic. Grandiose events unfolded here in the era of the Turkish Liberation War, which entered the historiography as the Turkish War of Independence, which lasted from 1919 to 2023. Here we just passed the crossroads, in the center of which stands the clock tower, a remarkable and common element of Turkish cities. Cumhuriyeti in Turkish. Of course, the main historical sites of the old city of Ankara are located in this area Ulus. Among the local tourist sites, the Victory Monument stands out, which is an equestrian statue of the father of the nation, Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, which we will soon reach. On Hukume Square stands the Julian Column, built specifically for the visit of this Roman emperor to this city. You will also see it a little later, in a couple of minutes, when we reach it. Also here are the ruins of ancient Roman baths, the Temple of Augustus, the Museum of the Republic, which is located in the building where the Turkish Parliament met from 1924 to 1960. Nearby you can also find the Museum of the War of Independence, whose collection is dedicated to the period of the beginning of the last century. We will make a separate issue on the channel about this museum. I think he will soon appear on the channel, or has already appeared.
Что это гостиница?
Now we are walking through historical places directly connected with Kemal Ataturk. Mustafa Kemal's military career developed successfully. He showed himself well in the war in the Balkans, worked as a military attaché in Sofia, and later became famous in the Dardanelles operation. In contrast to Ataturk's successes, the fate of the crumbling Ottoman Empire after the First World War was formed. It was bled dry, under strong foreign influence, with the complete loss of the army. It was Ataturk who was entrusted with disarming the latter. During this work, he forms a national movement and starts the Turkish War of Independence. The day it began, May 19th, was Mustafa Kemal's birthday, as he decided for himself. An interesting fact is that Soviet Russia provided the Turks with great financial support in the National Liberation War, supplying the militia not only with money, but also with weapons. Ataturk had such great popularity among the Turks that almost all of his expressions were parsed into quotations. One of them has become the real motto of the Turkish national movement. Translated into Russian it sounds, "Happy is the one who says, I am a Turk." Ataturk's main monument in Ankara was his mausoleum, Ancyra, where the leader rests. There is already a release about this place on the channel. But here we come to the monument, which stands on the square, which until the 1950s was the main square of Ankara. This is a bronze monument with an equestrian statue of Ataturk in honor of the victory in the Turkish War of Independence. Opened November 24, 1927. The monument was erected with the help of a nationwide action organized by journalist Yunus Nadi. The competition for the creation of the monument was won by Heinrich Krippel, a sculptor from Austria. The monument was restored in 2002. The monument is a group of bronze statues. In addition to the equestrian statue of Ataturk in the center, 3 other figures are present. 2 soldiers and 1 woman. One soldier is calling his friend to battle, but the other is just watching her. A woman carries a cannonball, showing the contribution of Turkish women during the Turkish War of Independence.
Ну, ты можешь здесь бизнес делать, но это правильно.
In general, we are now on Ataturk Boulevard. Here it begins and goes south, towards large commercial and government offices. Here it seems that the boulevard is boring and uninteresting, but to the south, as at the very beginning of this video, the boulevard opens up into a lively and large-scale city street. The boulevard stretches for about 5,600 meters from south to north. At its southernmost point, it intersects with Çankaya Boulevard, and at its northernmost point it merges with Ancyra Street. Its width is about 30 meters in the south. After the proclamation of the Turkish Republic, Ankara was redesigned by a group of urban planners, including Herman Janssen. Ataturk Boulevard was developed following this planning. But according to Fala Rifka Atay, the original plan came to fruition after many revisions. The first large square starting from the south is west of Kugalu Park, a small but popular public park famous for its Swan Lake. The second square is located at the intersection with Eskişehir Boulevard, which leads to the ring road around Ankara. Both squares have underground passages to facilitate traffic. Lay Square is generally considered to be the center of Ankara. We have already shown it to you at the beginning of the video. It is also the terminus of the Ankara metro line from the north, as well as the middle station of Ankara, light version of the metro. Siki Square is one of Ankara's busiest transport hubs with buses, metro and train. There are many embassy buildings in the southern half of this boulevard. The Turkish parliament is located to the west of the boulevard. The main buildings of most ministries are located on the boulevard. Some of these buildings were designed by the Austrian architect Clemens Holzmeister. Some ministries are now housed in new buildings on Eskişehir Boulevard, while others are still housed in old buildings. This area of Ankara is known as Bakanal, meaning ministry area in Turkish. This boulevard also houses the legendary Ankara Radio and the building of the Turkish Radio and Television Corporation, Ankara Opera House and many parks. In the meantime, we came to a unique building. This is another attraction of Ankara. Today it is the Museum of Economic Independence of the Business Bank of Turkey. In essence, this is a historical museum that tells both about important economic events in Turkey and the history of the bank, which was created as a result of the transformation of the former headquarters building of the Business Bank of Turkey. If you have been to Turkey, you have probably seen the signs of İş Bankası. It is an important bank for Turkey today. The museum inside is fantastically beautiful, but on the day of our visit it was closed. He has a day off. The building, which after completion was used as the third headquarters building of the Business Bank of Turkey, has served this purpose for many years. With the relocation of Ankara's city center to Kavakol, this building became a division where daily banking operations continued and trainings were conducted. As part of the project to improve Ulus Square and the surrounding areas and turn it into a cultural center, the bank's management decided to close the branch in the historic building and turn it into a museum. The building, which today is used as a museum, was built in 1929 by the Italian architect Giulio Mongeri. Although the building, whose exterior is dominated by figures of Ottoman and Seljuk architecture, was generally designed under the influence of the first national architectural trend of Turkey, the multiple horizontal lines used in the interfloor passages indicate the use of Neo-Renaissance architecture, and the glass awning above the main entrance door indicates the use of Art Nouveau style. The main foyer of the building, designed in an oval shape, was lit by natural light as a result of the preference for a glass ceiling as a covering element and acquired an aesthetic appearance thanks to stained glass windows created by Italian artists. If you are here, pay money and go inside the bank museum. This is an amazing place. In the meantime, we are already passing the Ankara University of Social Sciences campus building. Yes, this interesting building today is a university, or rather a branch. Here they teach social sciences, jurisprudence, there are research institutes of the Turkic world, and the Western world. The place is interesting because the old column of Julian is located here. In essence, Julian was the last pagan Roman emperor, who declared war on the Persians in 362 and laid out a route that was supposed to pass through Ankara. After the news that the emperor would take a break along the way in his expedition, and even more so he would remain in the city, then preparations began throughout the city, and this column was erected in his honor. Julian's Column, which had not undergone any repairs for many years, was restored by the governorate in 2001. This building is already 17 centuries old. The design is simple, it is a masonry 15 meters high. Well, we follow further into an interesting area. The historical district of Altındag, translated from Turkish as Golden Mountain, stretching from Ulus to the large Altın Park, is another popular place for tourists. Here is the ancient fortress of Ankara. You can get into it through the gate, decorated with a clock, to see the city from above. But we will not have time to reach it, but you will see it from the side. There is also the Haji Byram Mosque with a lead-covered grave of the poet himself and the Sufi. On the territory of Altındag is Hamam, a restored quarter with old wooden houses in the Ottoman style. This is without a doubt one of the most picturesque places in Ankara. The completely pedestrian area of Hamam, is a labyrinth of narrow streets lined with historic buildings, many of which today house restaurants, coffee shops, and souvenir shops. There are also 4 mosques of the Seljuk era, in particular the Seyfeddin Mosque, built in 1421. More than 30 reconstructed objects on an area of 210 hectares are protected by the state. It is in Hamam, that the world-famous Museum of Anatolian Civilizations is located, as well as a number of other interesting places. The Alukanlar Prison Museum, the Literary Museum and the Mehmet Akif Cultural Park. Yes, Hamamiyanu, this is a Turkish settlement ideally washed, painted, cleaned of any cleaning, in general, an exemplary quarter. Yes, and you can say that this is one of the oldest areas of the city, right? And that in the early 2000s it was practically empty. The restoration of this area was conceived by the Ankara Tourism Board, and now that everything has been repaired and many houses have been completely rebuilt, the residents have returned to the area, just like starlings in their birdhouse. In total, since 2006, more than 250 objects have undergone restoration here, and more than 30 places have been included in the list of state-protected ones. It is better to go to Hamam, at lunchtime or for dinner, because the streets are filled with all kinds of restaurants and cafes. Here coffee is brewed on the sand and Turkish cuisine is prepared. Hamam, today is a tidy area of several blocks, which looks the prettiest in all of Ankara, despite its small size. Sometimes, however, it seems that the city authorities overdid it with restoration work. The streets and houses almost did not retain the atmosphere of antiquity, although they look clean and presentable. According to Hamam, you can walk both during the day and in the evening, and the most attractive and lively area becomes, of course, during the holidays. It is worth a look here, for example, in Ramadan, when the municipality organizes many events in the quarter. Surprisingly, once in this area, we felt like in a different place, not at all in Ankara, but as in a separate mini-town.
Galatia. Гуляете?
Чего гулять? Нет, чего?
From here you can see the Ankara fortress. The walls of the fortress in Ankara are a museum in themselves. They are something like a layered centuries-old pie. The Celtic tribes began to build them, the Romans continued, but the Byzantines made the greatest contribution to the construction. As you understand, in different periods the fortress in Ankara belonged to different owners. The Celts, Persians, Goths, Arabs, Byzantines, Romans, Seljuk Turks, Ottoman Turks. Each of them finished building, repairing and altering something. At present, the fortress is also not empty. People still live in it just like in the territory of the fortress in Alanya. In the central part of the fortress, several streets have been restored especially for tourists. Everything looks nice and attractive. There are many souvenir shops, cafes and restaurants. There are a lot of foreigners walking around. This place is famous for the fact that here you can buy handmade woolen items, as well as see how women knit these very things. The fortress in Ankara is the oldest building in the city. Look at it from the neighboring area. Well, then we come to the iconic place for Ankara. This is the Temple of Augustus. The Temple of Augustus in Ankara is located near Ulu Square. It was founded in the 20s BC after the conquest of central Anatolia by the Roman Empire and the formation of the Roman province of Galatia. In the 2nd century the temple was expanded by the Romans. The remains that have survived to this day are the ruins of a structure erected by Philemon, the son of the last Galatian ruler Amynthos, as a sign of devotion to Emperor Augustus. The ruins are 2 side walls and part of an ornate doorway. Ancient Greek and Latin inscriptions are visible on the walls, the so-called list of the deeds of Augustus, and essays on the history of Rome. During its long history, the temple had to be a Christian church, a wheat warehouse, and a museum of stone monuments. In 1944, it was almost completely destroyed by bombing, and partially rebuilt after the war. Now it houses a small exhibition of ancient sculptures made of stone and bronze. But everything has its turn in the history of states. After all, this temple that has come down to us was itself built on the remains of the past. An earlier Phrygian temple from the 2nd century BC was also destroyed on this site. From the temple you can walk along the Roman road straight to Julians Column, which I already showed you. It is dedicated to the visit of the Roman emperor to the city. Near this place there is an excellent lookout at the big city, Ankara. By the way, there is a mosque here. The famous mosque built in the era of the Ottoman Empire and operating to this day. This is the Haji Byram Mosque. I already mentioned her earlier. But let us talk about it in more detail. Along with the Kocatepe Mosque in Ankara, it is one of the most famous mosques in Ankara. The mosque was named after the Turkish Sufi and poet Haji Byram I Veli. The building was rebuilt several times in the 16th century and in the 18th century. In particular, its first reconstruction took place under the leadership of the great architect Sinan. The interior of the mosque is distinguished by wooden ceilings and tiled mosaics that adorn the walls. On the territory of the mosque is the Mausoleum of Haji Byram I Veli, the famous poet and Sufi who lived in the 14th century. It is considered one of the most beautiful 15th century mausoleums in the country. The facade of the building is decorated with marble, and a black and white portal stands out on it. The entrance arch is decorated with colored stones. The original wooden doors of the mausoleum are today in the Ankara Ethnographic Museum. Haji Byram Mosque today is one of Ankara's tourist spots. The site was added in 2016 to Turkey's tentative list of UNESCO World Heritage Sites. There are parks and tombs around the Haji Byram Mosque. But next to this mosque is another amazing exhibit. This, it seems to me, is another ruin from the Temple of Augustus. And next to them on the square are elements of Muslim culture. Amazing place. But let us talk a little about the history of this city. Let us go through the stages briefly as we walk towards the main museums of the city. History of Ankara. Or why is it a Greek city? The capital of Turkey is rightfully considered one of the oldest cities in Asia Minor. The settlement became known somewhere from the 8th century BC under the name Ancyra, which means anchor in ancient Greek. The city was built by order of King Midas, who ruled in that era. Ankara is the capital of the Celtic state and part of the Roman Empire. Later in the 3rd century BC, the city of Ankara becomes the capital of the state of the Celts. And after that it becomes part of the Roman Empire and becomes one of the most important centers at the crossroads of trade routes, which I have already managed to tell you about. During the summer, Ankara was one of the favorite residences of the Roman emperors who vacationed here. History of Ankara during the Byzantine Empire. After the division of the Roman Empire into two parts, the Western and Eastern Empires, Ankara became part of the Byzantine Empire. The city continues to play an important role in the connection between West and East. Already in the future, seeing the impending Turkish threat, the inhabitants erected powerful fortifications, which are now one of the sites of the city. The capital of Turkey, for all its provinciality, is much older than the famous Istanbul Constantinople. How did the conquest of Ankara by the Turks? As a result of the Battle of Malazgirt in 1073, Ankara came under the control of the Seljuk Turks. The location of the city on trade routes allowed it to play a significant role in the life of the Ottoman Empire. At the very beginning of the 15th century, another event took place in the history of Ankara that influenced the life of not only the city, but the whole state. It was here that Sultan Bayezid I, as a result of the Battle of Angora, defeated the conquering army of Timur. However, the battle, which became the victory of the Turkish army, greatly destroyed the city. The coming to power of Sultan Murad II marked the restoration of the city and its development as one of the centers of trade. Later, Ankara became one of the many cities in the Ottoman Empire, but by the 19th century, the city gradually began to lose its significance as one of the trading centers and turned into a provincial city. A new impetus for the development of Ankara was the construction in 1893 of the Anatolian Railway, which connected the city with Istanbul. The history of Ankara in the 20th century has further expanded perspectives. Since 1919, Ankara has become the main headquarters of the revolutionary forces led by Kemal Ataturk, and in April 1920, the Grand National Assembly of Turkey gathers here, at which a new national government was formed. We just now went to the Museum of the Republic of the Grand National Assembly of Turkey. I will make a separate video about these museums on the channel, where I will tell you how the new Turkish parliament was created under Ataturk, and how Soviet weapons in the 1920s helped the Turks win the struggle for independence from the Entente bloc and the Greeks. Be sure to subscribe to the channel right now so as not to miss the details of this episode. This Museum of the Republic of Turkey is located in a historic building built in 1923 for the Republican People's Party. Subsequently, the Turkish parliament met here for 40 years. From the museum's obsession today is exclusively for historians and nationally minded Turks, but still there is something to see. There will be another release on this. Here are documents, photographs and personal belongings of the first 3 presidents of Turkey, including, of course, Kemal Ataturk. There is a large hall where Turkish politicians spoke from the podium, determining the future and vector of the country's development. Ankara remained a provincial town for several more years until it became the official capital of Turkey in 1923. From that moment on, important changes began to take place in the history of Ankara. The city, which became the capital of the young Turkish state, began to gradually change. Many new buildings were built, primarily intended for government agencies. Gradually, the appearance of Ankara began to appear, which surprisingly combines the old quarter with traditional buildings, and the new city of concrete, steel and glass. In the meantime, we went to the metropolitan subway. The Ankara metro is unique in that it is laid in a city whose terrain is not suitable for this type of public transport. The mountainous Ankara creates serious difficulties for the construction of the metro. Therefore, as an alternative to the subway, either a light railroad or a cable car appears. The metro map of Ankara clearly shows how developed the network of stations is in the west and north of the city and their complete absence in the south and east. Here, the role of public transport is performed by buses, dolmushi, the so-called minibuses, and taxis. Ankara light rail line and 2 metro lines. There is a linear principle of train movement with 2 interchange stations. The power supply of trains on all lines is carried out using a contact rail. The number of metro stations is 54 stations. The opening date of this subway is August 30, 1996. Yes, metro is quite young. The fare costs about 10 Turkish lira, but varies from year to year due to the high inflation in the country today. We are now going by metro towards an amazing place, the Mausoleum and Tomb of Kemal Ataturk. The place is called Anıtkabir. I have already made an issue about this place on my YouTube channel, be sure to check it out. There is a lot of detailed and useful information. But back to the main topic. Why did Ankara become the capital under Kemal Ataturk? Ataturk had personal reasons for moving the capital from Istanbul. Firstly, he found the location of Istanbul strategically dangerous for the new republican government. Both the British and Greeks could come from the sea. And secondly, he sought to move away from the Byzantine and Ottoman associations caused by Constantinople. In 1930, along with the status of the capital of Turkey, the name Ankara was finally established, replacing the ancient name of the city of Angora, widely known because of the Angora wool produced here, the so-called delicate pile, which is obtained from the hairs of the Angora rabbit, which was so named for its long hair by analogy with the goat of the same name, bred in Anatolia. Friends, walking through the streets of Ankara, you can visit another amazing place. This is the Mausoleum of Ataturk, Anıtkabir. The mausoleum is not just a local landmark. But in fact, this is a very significant place for the Turks themselves. It is dedicated to Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. This is a mausoleum. This leader is treated with deep respect here.
Mustafa'yı büyük koyun. Nöbetin vukuatı olarak teslim ediyorum komutanım. İstikamet bayrak. Buyurun. Ma.
In fact, on the channel we have already done a detailed release about this place. Be sure to check out the link in the video description. In the meantime, we have already taken the metro back to the city center. And now we are again on Ataturk Boulevard. Ankara is a large modern city, relatively safe, but tourists should still remember to be careful. So, all historical monuments and the most interesting museums are located in the old center, which is considered a fairly safe area. Kizilay, the new center of Ankara, where we are now walking along the boulevard, is always crowded and safe. Walking at night is always and everywhere unsafe. In Ankara, for example, it is not recommended to wander at night through the dark streets in the quarters around the fortress. As elsewhere, tourists should refrain from conflict with suspicious individuals or groups of people, especially when carrying valuables and large amounts of cash. In a word, just do not neglect the elementary precautions and you will be safe in Ankara. Ankara is a rather calm city, and the rhythm of life in it is noticeably different from the rhythm of life in the country's largest and most popular city, Istanbul. Come here and explore the city and its sights on your own. Alas, I have not been able to show you much yet, but I am sure that you yourself will be able to see something new by visiting the city. Hope you enjoy our trip together.
Да.
And in conclusion to this issue, Katya wants to tell you something. What will you tell us? Thank you very much for walking with us in Ankara. We look forward to seeing you on your next trip. In the meantime, subscribe and be sure to leave your comments. Well, perhaps that's all. We got such a quick express tour. Thanks that watched up to this point. Well, I recommend that you watch other videos about Turkey, Russia, Georgia, Belarus, United Arab Emirates on this channel. There is a lot of historical overtones. Think, you'll like it. Subscribe to the channel in advance, press the bell and do not miss new releases. Also, if you have the opportunity, you can make a small donation in order to the releases were even brighter and more intense. To do this, it is enough to make a translation by the screenshot on the video, or use the links in the description under this video. God bless you from adversity. And we'll see you in future episodes. Don't skip.